So, Inside Dude just came out and I was pleasantly surprised. I was scared it was going to be a bust because Inside Out 1 is probably one of my favorite Pixar movies, but I was proven wrong and the movie was amazing. One of the best Pixar sequels for sure. We got 5 new immersions, and along with Riley's OG immersions, the mind is pretty busy now. So today we are doing a tier list ranking every single Inside Out immersion. Right off the bat, let's start with Disgust. Disgust, I think she belongs in C tier. I mean, the green kind of fits her color anyways. She doesn't really do a whole lot in the movie, but she is a very important immersion. And she's also one of the OGs, so that's a couple extra points. And in my opinion, she's kind of a mix between fear and anger, if you know what I mean. I think like a high C, low B tier, probably where she belongs. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below what your favorite immersion is in Inside Out. Next, we have Ennui, which is just French for boredom, I think. It's a new immersion, it's French, so probably here. No, I'm joking. I'm not really sure about this one right now. There's quite a bit of debate in psychology whether or not boredom is actually an immersion. But recently, the growing consensus is that boredom actually is an immersion, just like any other immersion that we experience. I think the definition of boredom really helps define itself. Ennui is not just the lack of immersions, it's an immersion you feel when there is a lack of engagement. For example, you feel bored when there's nothing to do or think about, or there's no other emotions you're feeling. That's why a lot of people confuse it with the absence of emotions, but it actually is just an emotion by itself. Think about it. When you're doing chores and homework, etc., you still feel boredom sometimes. So it's definitely not a lack of immersion, it actually is an immersion itself. I think it's kind of like a filler immersion, so you feel it when there's no other emotions you're feeling, if that makes sense. I think Ennui is a good break between while your other immersions running your mind 24/7. I think it's a good break between your emotions making all your decisions for you. I also think boredom is really important for developing creativity and stuff like that. Like, you can't really think about anything important if you're always feeling a sudden immersion or you're thinking about some random stuff, right? I also really like her portrayal in Inside Out 2. It's really good, and I like the fact she is kind of suppressed by her phone and the constant stimulus and dopamine rushes that come with it. I think it's a good commentary on society right now. And of course, who can forget about the sarcasm jokes? They were pretty hilarious. So I think for all of those reasons, Ennui deserves to be in the A tier. Next is Envy, another new immersion. I'm not really feeling this one. I'm not sure. She just didn't have a lot to do in the new film. Yeah, I like her character design, but that kind of goes for every single immersion here. The character design is brilliant. Considering the other immersions and their impacts, I don't think she does a whole lot in the movie. I mean, she does catalyze a lot of stuff for anxiety, but other than that, she doesn't do a whole lot. Actually, before I rank her, it's probably important to point out what envy actually is. A lot of people confuse envy for jealousy and vice versa, and even more people don't even know there's a difference between the two emotions. Envy occurs when you lack something that you desire, whether that be an attribute, a quality, or a possession. For example, you might feel envious of a coworker who got a big promotion. Jealousy is different. Jealousy is when you're afraid of losing something you already possess. And that something is mainly a possession or a relationship. So for example, you might feel jealous when your boyfriend or girlfriend is spending too much time with someone else. It is true that often envy and jealousy come hand in hand. For example, you might feel jealous that your boyfriend or girlfriend is spending time with someone because you're envious of that person. So it is pretty similar, but I do think envy is a more positive emotion than jealousy, because jealousy is like purely an ugly emotion, but envy can sometimes be positive. Like, it can give rise to aspirations and goals. Like, you might be envious of a person that you look up to, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't think she belongs in F tier, but I also don't think she is as good as Disgust. So I think I'll put her in D tier. I think that's fair. Next, we have Fear. Fear goes straight in the S tier, no argument there. My most recent video actually covers why I think Fear is the most important immersion. So if you are wondering about that, go check out that video. Basically, in a nutshell, fear keeps us alive. Like, without fear, we probably won't survive to this point. It's an instinctual immersion that is pretty necessary for our survival. is not just important for discerning threats, it's also really important for our long-term planning and decision making. I know in the film, anxiety kind of takes over the planning and stuff like that, so fear is more just the basic instinctual side. But still, I think even with that, it still contributes a lot to our decision making and our long-term planning. And just with the survival-based stuff alone, I think it does deserve a S tier. If you're still not convinced, like I said, check out my previous video, it will explain everything. Next, we have anxiety. This one is tough. It's either S tier or A tier, to be honest. First off, the way they define anxiety to be the one that actually makes plans and looks to the future is obviously very important. Our long-term planning and decision making is probably one of our most important aspects as humans that made us such a strong species. So for similar reasons as fear, it definitely deserves to be up here high in the tier list. Can we talk about her portrayal in Inside Out 2? It was so brilliant. I think they really nailed what she will look like in the mind of a 13-year-old. It's definitely one of the better aspects of the film. They got it down so well. It's very relatable and feels exactly like how anxiety should feel. The whole scene where she becomes like the Flash and creates that tornado, and then Riley's having like a panic attack, was very surreal and very emotional as well. So I want to put anxiety in the S tier, but just because how much of a pain she can be, like in real life, I don't think she deserves the S tier, so I'm gonna put her in A tier just to be safe. Next, we have Embarrassment. He's a big guy, and as with all of the other emotions, the character design for Embarrassment is brilliant. I mean, you can't say that for every single emotion, but I just have to point out for Embarrassment, they did it really well. Many people think embarrassment is like a purely negative emotion, but that's kind of the theme with Inside Out, isn't it? To just show you how important all of these emotions are. Embarrassment is a very important emotion. It is key to maintaining our social cohesion. It's a crucial cog in our communication and social systems, which is actually our biggest strength as a species, evolutionary speaking. It's also a sign of self-awareness. Like if you feel embarrassed, it means you've got a sense of self-awareness. You're aware of yourself doing certain actions and having reactions from other people. And not only that, it's not just a sign, but it's also a contributor to further self-development and awareness as well. Feeling embarrassed once or twice as a kid really builds towards character building and gives you a better understanding of yourself as well. Lastly, embarrassment is a crucial aspect of relieving stress in awkward situations. It might be uncomfortable at first, but if you get embarrassed, it's like kind of cathartic. You get over it really quickly as opposed to if you just stay awkward the entire time. Just like sadness, embarrassment also acts as a cue for help to those around you. Like if you feel embarrassed, other people will come and help you out. So I think it's a pretty important emotion. Does it deserve the A tier? I don't think so. I think B tier is a pretty comfortable place for it. The reason I don't think it deserves the A tier is because anxiety is actually just so much of a better representation in the actual film. So I don't think it's up there with anxiety or ennui. So I think it deserves the B tier. Here we go, we have joy, the main attraction in Riley's mind. Joy goes straight in the F tier. No, I'm kidding. Joy is not in the F tier. It's because everyone loves happiness. It's like what everyone's trying to strive for to some extent. But there is a pretty big difference between feeling emotion joy and actual long-term happiness is actually quite different. Like short-term joy might actually impact how much joy you feel in the future. For example, in the first film, joy really suppresses the other emotions, and it's mostly shown in her treatment with sadness. Like she doesn't really get why sadness is there, and she kind of doesn't want Riley to feel sad or really any of the other emotions. She's really controlling and she tries to take over the scene to make Riley feel as happy as possible. But then you learn what happens when all of those unexpressed emotions actually build up, especially with sadness. Obviously Riley felt sad moving away to San Francisco and she didn't really express it, and then it kind of, blew up in Riley's face. People say joy is overrated, and I do think so to a certain extent, but I do think it's definitely the S tier or A tier. I also really love her portrayal in Inside Out 2, the scene where she's called delusional and she turns around really weirdly. That was like straight out of a horror movie. But I do think she's still a very good character and a very important emotion. I won't put her in S tier, so for that reason I'll put her in A tier. I think not as good as anxiety, but better than ennui for sure. Next we have nostalgia. I mean, there's just not a lot to say about nostalgia. She's barely in the movie. She's really just there for a couple jokes and a couple quips, not even really a main character. Yeah, she has like 2 lines and like 5 seconds of screen time. And nostalgia is kind of bittersweet. I don't even think she's a purely positive emotion. Like when you feel nostalgic about something, you're feeling happy about the thing in the past, but you're also feeling sad about the way things are right now. So it's kind of like a mix between happiness and sadness, if that makes sense. I think nostalgia actually creates a lot of bias. It blinds you to bad things that happened in the past and only presents you with the good stuff. So for that reason, nostalgia is going into the F tier. It's not elderly abuse because, I mean, she's technically in the mind of a 13-year-old, so I'm sure it's fine. Sadness is, well, yeah, sadness has to go in the F tier. I'm sorry for all those sadness fans out there. She definitely deserves the F tier because, well, she sucks. Okay, I know she's important. We all know how important she is. You know, it's important to process trauma and also a cue to help for those around you. I get it. She's important. But that doesn't mean that she doesn't suck. It doesn't feel as cathartic as something like anger or even embarrassment. It just kind of sucks, and sometimes it can last a long time. Sadness it's just a terrible emotion, okay? I'm sorry, it's going into the F tier. Last but not least, we have anger, the GOAT emotion, okay? You can't convince me otherwise. Anger goes in the S tier. Every single scene with anger is so funny. If you haven't watched Inside Out 2, there's that scene with that special character from a certain, you know, children's cartoon that makes him even funnier. You'll know what I mean if you watch the movie. And let's be honest, anger is the most cathartic emotion out of the list. It also makes sure we're not taken advantage of, and it gives us like a slight aggressive edge that we all need a bit of sometimes. Obviously, too much anger is bad, but that goes for literally every single emotion on the list, so I won't really talk about that. He is the only emotion with literal superpowers. Like, look at this. He's got fire for hair. The man is so bold and insecure about it that he had to firebend to make hair happen. And he actually melted glass with this firebending. How hot does the fire have to be? 2500 to 2900 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 1500 degrees Celsius. That is pretty crazy. That much heat is generated by that little guy right there. I mean, what else do I have to say? That's crazy. I mean, I'm kind of scared to put him anywhere else. I mean, if you put him anywhere else that's not S tier, he'll probably just blast you with fire that's 1500 degrees hot, okay? Anger is an S tier, no discussion. And there we go. That's the end of the tier list. We have in S tier, anger and fear. A tier, we have anxiety, joy, ennui. B tier, we have embarrassment. C tier, we have disgust. D tier, we have envy. F tier, we have, I think sadness goes in front of nostalgia. We have sadness and nostalgia. Here is the list of all 10 emotions in Inside Out. Let me know in the comment section down below what your list will look like.